Our first stop on our desert adventure was at a campground on the Kern River just outside of Bakersfield. Most sites were occupied, but spaced out well, which made for a nice quiet evening. We got camp set up, cooked a quick hot dog dinner, and kicked our feet up after a day on the road. After relaxing for a bit, we sacked out, ready to continue on to the Mojave Preserve. Or so we thought. Alright, change of plans. Mojave's going to be blasted with wind for the next week and get down to freezing temperatures overnight. So we're going to go a little bit north to Death Valley. It's supposed to be a little bit warmer, no windstorms, so that's where we're headed. Back on the road the next day, it did not take long to come to our next point of interest. A deep granite canyon with the Kern River flowing through the bottom of it. Driving along the river, looking up at the rocky peaks towering above, I got the feeling the adventure had truly started. We made a quick stop at Father Crowley's Landing to meet up with the rest of the crew and hopefully catch a jet flying through the canyon. Then it was back on the road and down into the valley. Without much of a plan, we headed for the Furnace Creek Visitor Center looking for maps and info. Unfortunately, the Visitor Center closes at 4 and we didn't quite make it in time, so we found a site at the nearby campground and set camp for the night. Some of us had a little more energy to burn after a long day in the truck, then it was off to bed. The next morning brought the kind of beautiful desert sunrise you can only hope for. Then it was back on the road to pound more pavement, something you will find a lot of in Death Valley. Our next destination was Titus Canyon. For some reason I still can't figure out, we opted not to air down, thinking the washboard would end and the road would smooth out just around the corner. This was not the case. Air down on this road. It's 20-something miles of rough, rocky going. Not a very technical drive, but it does get narrow and windy with some steep drops off the side. On your way to the canyon, it's worth a stop at the Leadfield Mine. It's a good spot to grab some lunch and even has an old abandoned mining town to explore. The story of the town might be more interesting than the site itself. A man named C.C. Julian was behind the rise and inevitable fall of this mining camp. He blasted tunnels in the hills, laced them with lead ore, and proceeded to spin tales of a lead-rich deposit he had discovered, prompting investors to shell out cash and miners to flock to the site. He even convinced the Postal Service to set up a post office on site. Within 6 months, the jig was up and Julian had fled with pockets full of his investors' money. We did not spend too much time here as we weren't sure how much further we had to go and it was getting late in the day. We left quite a bit unexplored here, but it was still an interesting little side adventure. You can't help but wonder at the hard work and ingenuity so many people staked on one man's false claims. Just past Leadfield, you come to the mouth of Titus Canyon, and shortly after, the petroglyphs that are worth a quick stop. I believe there may also be a spring nearby that we missed. A quick look around and it was back on the trail and onto the closest thing to an obstacle on the road. A short, steep descent with a few loose rocks and potholes. If you are looking for an exciting driving experience, this road is not for you. This one is about the views and sights along the way. Coming to the end of the canyon much later than we anticipated, we headed back to Furnace Creek instead of further north into the park. The weather had shifted and the windstorms we had tried to avoid hit us hard that night. Let's just skip that part and move on to the next day. Opting not to pay the fuel prices as I had plenty still, we made our way south through the park with no real destination. After the rough canyon road the day before, we aired down as soon as we were off pavement, then headed through Greenwater Basin, looking to pick up the highway on the other side of the pass. We stopped to stretch our legs and grab a snack, checked out some of the local flora, and then made some good time on the soft, sandy road. We aired up before hitting the highway and heading further south. At some point, we decided to hop back off the highway and look for camp. Spotting a cluster of palm trees in the distance through the binoculars, we decided to roll the dice and made our way towards them. After about 2 very slow miles, we came to yet another abandoned mine site. With daylight running out, we rebuilt the fire pit someone had partially disassembled, got the house set up, and cooked some burgers. We enjoyed a nice, relaxing evening, which was welcome after the windstorm the night before. We were met with another amazing sunrise the next morning, with daylight painting the surrounding hills in the distance. After breakfast, we broke camp and headed up the hill into the mine to do some exploring. There was an abundance of dilapidated and collapsed buildings on the way up. There were some tailing piles tucked into the mountainside, but some of the roads had washed out, and we decided not to burn the time to hike up to them. We drove as far as we could, then headed in on foot. As we expected from seeing palm trees from a distance the day before, there was water. Not what I would call fresh, but water. A small oasis in this dry, dusty land. A little bushwhacking down what was likely a game trail, kept somewhat clear by the few creatures hardy enough to call the desert home, produced only an old cistern. Although it wasn't the crystal clear pool with sandy banks surrounded by palm trees we had hoped for, it was still a very unique, interesting spot to explore. We bid farewell to our little oasis and headed back out to pick up the road we left the day before. Believe it or not, we found more water. Saratoga Springs was utilized by the mule teams hauling various materials from the desert mines and is now home to several species that are found nowhere else in the world. We made our way from the springs back to paved roads and aired up to hit the highway. That concluded the Death Valley leg of the trip. All told, it was an amazing journey, minus a windstorm, but that's part of the adventure, and more so, an adventure in the desert. I hope you enjoyed this video, and that it inspires you to have some adventures of your own. Stay tuned for the next part of our trip through the Mojave Preserve in the next episode of SBR Adventures.